Victoria Hartwell adjusted her cream-colored blazer as she watched her 7-year-old daughter Grace from across the playground. At 39, Victoria commanded boardrooms and led a pharmaceutical empire worth billions. But none of her success had prepared her for the challenge of raising a daughter who hadn't spoken a single word since her father's death in a car accident 18 months ago. Grace sat quietly on the swing, her long blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. She moved gently back and forth, lost in her own world as children laughed and played around her. Victoria's heart ached watching her daughter's isolation, despite the countless specialists, therapists, and doctors they'd consulted. She just needs time, the child psychologist had said. Selective mutism after trauma isn't uncommon. Don't push her. But Victoria felt helpless, watching her once chatty daughter retreat further into silence each day. On the swing beside Grace, a dark-haired man in his mid-30s was patiently helping his own daughter, a girl about Grace's age with pigtails and a bright yellow dress. Unlike the other parents who were clustered together on phones or chatting, this father was completely focused on his child. "That's it, Emma," he encouraged softly. "You're getting so good at pumping your legs. Remember what we practiced?" Victoria found herself watching as the man, whose name she would soon learn was Marcus Rivera, demonstrated the motion with gentle patience. There was something in his approach, a natural understanding of childhood that made Victoria realize how often she tried to solve Grace's problems, rather than simply being present with her. Emma, Marcus's daughter, suddenly noticed Grace on the swing beside her. "Hi," she said cheerfully. "I'm Emma. Do you want to swing together? We could see who can go higher." Grace looked at Emma but remained silent, her expression both interested and wary. Marcus noticed the interaction and glanced over at Victoria, who was approaching with the careful smile she'd perfected for these moments when other children tried to engage Grace. "I'm sorry," Victoria said quietly to Marcus. "Grace doesn't really talk to other children. She's been through some difficult times." Marcus looked at Grace with understanding rather than pity. "No need to apologize," he said gently. "Emma, why don't you show Grace how you learned to swing so high? Sometimes it's nice to just enjoy playing without needing to talk about it." Victoria was struck by his response. Most adults either tried too hard to get Grace to speak or treated her like she was broken. Marcus simply accepted her silence and found a way to include her. Emma began swinging enthusiastically, narrating her technique. "See? You push with your legs like this and then you lean back and whoosh. You go really high. My daddy taught me that swinging is like flying, but safer." Grace watched intently and, to Victoria's amazement, began to mimic Emma's movements. Soon both girls were swinging in rhythm, and for the first time in months, Victoria saw something that looked almost like joy on her daughter's face. "I'm Marcus," the man said, extending his hand to Victoria. "And that's my daughter, Emma. We come here most afternoons after I pick her up from school." "Victoria," she replied, shaking his hand. "And that's Grace. This is actually our first time here. I thought maybe being around other children might help." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Emma went through something similar after her mother died 2 years ago. Not exactly the same, but she stopped laughing for months. Sometimes I think children need to feel safe before they can find their voices again. Victoria felt a shock of recognition. Here was someone who understood loss, who had navigated the impossible terrain of helping a child heal from trauma. "How did you help her?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Honestly, I'm not sure I did much," Marcus said, watching the girls swing together. "I just tried to be patient and let her know that whatever she was feeling was okay. One day she started laughing again, and eventually the words came back too." As they talked, Emma had convinced Grace to try the slide. Victoria watched nervously as her silent daughter followed the chattering Emma up the ladder. But something in Marcus's calm presence helped her resist the urge to hover protectively. "Grace seems like a thoughtful kid," Marcus observed. "Emma's drawn to her, which is interesting. Emma usually gravitates toward the loudest children, but there's something about Grace that she connects with." Victoria watched as Emma waited patiently at the top of the slide for Grace to position herself, then counted down from 3 before they both slid down together. Grace was smiling, actually smiling in a way Victoria hadn't seen since before the accident. "Daddy, can Grace come play with us again tomorrow?" Emma called out as they reached the bottom of the slide. Marcus looked at Victoria, raising an eyebrow in question. We're here most days around 4 o'clock if you'd like to join us. Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. I think Grace would like that very much. Over the next 3 weeks, the playground visits became a cherished routine. Victoria found herself looking forward to seeing Marcus, whose gentle wisdom about parenting helped her see Grace's healing process differently. Marcus, a carpenter who had learned patience through years of detailed woodwork,
had an intuitive understanding of how to give children the space they needed to grow. Emma,
meanwhile, had appointed herself Grace's best friend and protector. She chattered enough for both of them, included Grace in games without expecting verbal responses, and somehow made Grace's silence feel like a choice rather than a limitation. Emma, show Grace the fort we built yesterday, Marcus suggested one afternoon as the girls finished their swings. Emma grabbed Grace's hand and led her to an elaborate structure they had created with blocks and slides. This is our secret castle, Emma explained seriously. Only we know the magic words to get in. But you don't have to say them out loud, Grace. You can just think them really hard. Victoria watched as Grace nodded solemnly and followed Emma into their imaginary world. For the first time since David's death, her daughter was truly playing. She's been different since we started coming here, Victoria told Marcus as they sat on a nearby bench. Her teacher says she's more engaged at school even though she still doesn't speak. Marcus smiled. Emma talks about Grace constantly. She's convinced they're going to be best friends forever. It's been good for her too, having someone who really listens. That afternoon, as they prepared to leave the playground, Emma suddenly stumbled and scraped her knee on the gravel. She began to cry, more from surprise than pain, but the sound was heartbreaking. Grace rushed to Emma's side, her face filled with concern. She looked around frantically for help, then at Marcus, who was approaching with a first aid kit, then back at Emma, who was sobbing. Emma, it's okay, Grace said suddenly, her voice clear and strong. Your daddy's coming to fix it. Don't cry. The playground seemed to go silent. Victoria felt her knees nearly give out as she heard her daughter's voice for the first time in 18 months. Marcus stopped in his tracks, understanding immediately the magnitude of what had just happened. Emma stopped crying and looked at Grace with wide eyes. Grace, you talked. You talked to help me. Grace looked around, seeming surprised by her own voice, then looked directly at Victoria. Mommy, she said softly, Emma was hurt. I had to help her. Victoria knelt down and gathered Grace into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Yes, sweetheart, she whispered. You helped your friend. I'm so proud of you. Marcus knelt beside Emma, cleaning her scraped knee while watching the emotional reunion between mother and daughter. Sometimes, he said gently to Emma, people find their voices when they need to help someone they care about. Emma nodded seriously, then looked at Grace. Grace, will you keep talking now? I have so many things to tell you. Grace looked at Emma, then at Victoria, then at Marcus, who had become such an important part of their healing. I think so, she said quietly. I think I'm ready to talk again. 6 months later, Victoria and Marcus stood in the same playground, watching as Grace and Emma played together with the easy friendship of children who had helped each other heal. Grace chatted constantly now, making up for lost time, while Emma listened with the same patient attention she had always shown. Thank you, Victoria said to Marcus, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't think Grace would have found her voice without Emma's friendship, without your patience. Marcus took her hand, their relationship having grown slowly and naturally as they supported each other through the challenges of single parenthood. I think they helped each other, he said, and maybe they helped us too. Grace ran over to them, breathless with excitement. Mommy, Marcus, Emma, and I want to build the biggest sandcastle ever. Will you help us? Victoria looked at this man who had helped her daughter find her voice and her own heart find love again. Yes, she said, squeezing Marcus's hand. We'll help you build anything you can dream of. As the four of them headed to the sandbox together, Victoria realized that sometimes the most profound healing happens not in doctors' offices or therapy sessions, but in the simple moments when love creates a safe space for wounded hearts to open again.